The grand hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly half a mile, its ceiling lost in artificial clouds that drifted between towers of light. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, some breathing oxygen, others methane, all separated by shimmering force fields that kept their atmospheres distinct. At the center of it all stood a circular platform where the accused were meant to defend themselves. Today, humanity stood there. But they were not defending anything, Ambassador Daniel Hayes watched the vote tally appear on the massive holographic display above them. 47 votes to suspend humanity's membership indefinitely. 3 votes against, 0 abstentions. The numbers glowed in the air like an epitaph. Beside him, Commander Lisa Bennett stood perfectly still in her dress uniform, hands clasped behind her back. Her face showed nothing, though Hayes knew she was furious. To his left, Dr. Kevin Morris adjusted his glasses and quietly closed the datapad he'd been reading. The vote was done. There was nothing left to say. High Chancellor Zarthik of the Vraxian Empire rose from his seat, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of triumph. His translator converted his clicking speech into flat, emotionless words that echoed through the chamber. The Council has spoken. Humanity's aggressive tendencies, their refusal to accept proper guidance, and their constant interference in matters beyond their understanding have made this action necessary. You have 30 standard days to remove your presence from all Council territories and affiliated zones. Hayes had prepared a speech. He'd spent weeks crafting it, finding the right words to explain humanity's position, to defend their actions, to remind the Council of everything humans had contributed over the past 3 decades. The speech was stored in his datapad, nearly 5,000 words of carefully reasoned argument. He deleted it with a single gesture. Instead, Hayes simply bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. "We understand. We'll begin immediately." The silence that followed was unexpected. Matriarch Salvara of the Caltharian Collective leaned forward in her seat, her silver eyes narrowing. "You have nothing to say? No protest?" "No, Matriarch. You've made your decision? We respect it. You won't even defend yourselves?" This came from Elder Costum of the Mindari, one of the 3 who had voted against the expulsion. His voice carried genuine confusion. Hayes turned to face the Elder, and for a moment something flickered across his expression. Sadness, perhaps, or disappointment. "Elder, we've been defending ourselves for 5 years now. Every proposal rejected, every warning ignored, every offer of help refused. We're tired of talking to people who won't listen. So yes, we have nothing more to say." He turned to his small delegation. "Let's go home." They walked out of the council chambers in complete silence. No dramatic exit. No slammed doors. They simply left, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Behind them, the council chamber erupted in confused chatter. Many had expected anger, threats, perhaps even violence. The quiet acceptance was somehow more unsettling. The following 3 weeks became a masterclass in efficiency. Human ships arrived at every station, outpost, and facility throughout Council space. They came with cargo vessels, transport ships, and construction crews. They worked in shifts around the clock, and they worked fast. At Research Station Meridian, Dr. Carl Jensen supervised the evacuation of 30 years of scientific equipment. The station had been jointly operated by humans and 4 other species, studying spatial anomalies in the region. The other species watched in growing alarm as the humans packed up not just their own equipment, but everything they'd built or contributed to shared projects. "You can't take the quantum scanners," protested Velkoth, the Thelmari head researcher. "Those are shared resources." Jensen didn't look up from the inventory list on his datapad. "Check your records. Humans designed them, built them, and maintained them. They're ours, but we need them for the research. Then build your own." Jensen's voice wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. "We shared the basic principles in papers we published 8 years ago. You have the knowledge. You just need to do the work." The same scene played out across hundreds of facilities. Humans hadn't realized how much of the Council's infrastructure they'd built and maintained until they started taking it back. Or rather, the Council hadn't realized it, on the trade routes of the Outer Rim. Captain Nicole Harper commanded a small flotilla of human patrol vessels. For 12 years, her ships had kept the shipping lanes safe from pirates and raiders, working alongside Council security forces. When she received the recall order, she gathered her small fleet and prepared to leave. The local Council security commander, a Vraxian named Torvaz, contacted her with obvious distress. "Captain Harper, you can't leave. We don't have enough ships to cover these routes." "I'm sorry, Commander. We've been recalled. But the pirates will, I know. We forwarded all our patrol schedules, tactical data, and threat assessments to Council Security Command. It's all there. You just need to act on it." "With what ships?" "We relied on your fleet for coverage." Harper's expression softened slightly. "Commander, we offered to train more of your pilots in anti-piracy tactics 3 years ago. The request was denied as unnecessary. We offered to share our ship designs 2 years ago. That was rejected as too expensive. We can't help people who won't help themselves." The transmission ended. Harper's fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving the Outer Rim routes with half their previous protection. In the medical centers of a dozen worlds, human doctors and researchers quietly packed their notes and equipment. Dr. Patricia Cole had spent 15 years on the Thelmari homeworld, working with local physicians to develop treatments for diseases that affected both species. Her Thelmari colleague, Dr. Ventari, followed her through the empty laboratory with growing desperation. "Patricia, please. The vaccine research for the Caltharian flu, we're only months away from a breakthrough." Cole sealed another storage container. "I've uploaded all my notes to the shared database. Everything I know, you know. You can finish the work. But your expertise, Ventari, I've taught you everything I can. You're a brilliant doctor. You don't need me." Cole turned to face her colleague, and her voice was gentle but firm. "But you do need to believe in yourself. The Council has made it very clear that they don't need human help. So I'm giving you the chance to prove them right." Within 22 days, every human had left Council space. The embassies were sealed but not sabotaged. The research stations were locked but not destroyed. The trade agreements were terminated but honored to the letter. Humanity didn't burn bridges. They simply, quietly, walked away from them. The last human vessel to leave was Ambassador Hayes' personal transport. As it prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel, Hayes stood on the observation deck, looking back at the massive Council station that hung in space like a jeweled crown. Commander Bennett joined him. "Any regrets, sir?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it came to this. I regret that they couldn't see us as partners." "But leaving?" "No regrets about that. Where do we go now?" "Out beyond the rim. Beyond their charts. We'll find somewhere new. Somewhere we can build without being told we're doing it wrong." Hayes turned away from the viewport. "Set course for deep space. Let's go home." The ship jumped, and with it the last human presence vanished from Council space. Behind them, in the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, celebrations were already beginning. High Chancellor Zarthik raised a toast to the Council's newfound independence from human interference. Matriarch Selvara spoke of a new era of proper galactic civilization. Only Elder Costum sat in silence, staring at the empty seat where the human delegation used to sit. Something felt wrong. The victory felt hollow, but he couldn't quite explain why, so he said nothing. In the weeks that followed, life in Council space continued. Ships traveled the trade routes. Research continued in the stations. Medical centers treated patients. Everything seemed normal, but cracks were already forming. Small things at first. A delayed shipment here. A malfunction there. Nothing that seemed connected to humanity's absence. Not yet. 6 months had passed since humanity's quiet departure, and the cracks were no longer small. Captain Torvaz sat in his command chair aboard the security vessel Stalwart Guardian, staring at the tactical display with growing frustration. 3 merchant ships had been hit by pirates in the past week alone. All 3 had been traveling routes that used to be patrolled by Captain Harper's human flotilla. Sir, we're receiving another distress call, his communications officer reported. Freighter Dawn's Promise, Caltharian Registry, under attack in Sector 7. Torves checked the deployment map. His nearest patrol ship was 4 hours away. The pirates would be long gone by then. Dispatch the Blade of Honor, best possible speed. That will leave Sector 12 unprotected, sir, I know. Torves rubbed his temples with 2 of his 4 hands. I know. The problem was simple mathematics. Before the humans left, there had been enough ships to cover the outer rim routes. The human patrol vessels had covered roughly 40% of the territory, allowing council ships to handle the rest. Now, with the humans gone, there simply weren't enough vessels to maintain proper coverage. Torves had requested additional ships from Council. Security Command? The request had been approved, but building and deploying new vessels would take at least a year. In the meantime, the pirates were having the easiest time they'd had in decades. He thought about Harper's final message, about the training programs and ship designs humans had offered. At the time, they'd seemed unnecessary. The system had been working fine. Why fix what wasn't broken? Except it had only been working because humans were quietly filling the gaps, halfway across council space. On the Thelmari homeworld, Dr. Ventari stood in a medical center that was rapidly running out of room. The plague had started in the southern continent 6 weeks ago. Now it had spread to every major population center on the planet. The symptoms were horrific. High fever, respiratory failure, organ breakdown. The mortality rate was climbing past 30%. Tens of millions were already dead, and the numbers grew every day. Ventari looked at the test results for the 100th time, searching for something they'd missed. The plague was unlike anything in their medical databases. It seemed to mutate rapidly, adapting to every treatment they tried. "We need to contact the humans," said one of his assistants. A young doctor named Colmara. "The humans are gone," Ventari replied tiredly. "But Dr. Cole's research is all in our databases. I have access to everything she left behind." Ventari gestured at the screens around them, filled with Patricia Cole's notes and research files. "The problem is that her notes reference collaborative work, cross-species studies that were never fully documented because she was here to explain them. It was a problem they kept encountering." Patricia Cole had been brilliant and generous with her knowledge. But there was a difference between having someone's notes and having the person who wrote them. The notes didn't answer questions. They didn't adapt to new situations. They didn't have intuition built from years of experience. The Thelmari government had sent an official request to humanity's last known coordinates. The response had been automatic, computerized. Humanity is no longer available for consultation. Please contact the Galactic Council for assistance. So they had contacted the Council. The Council had sent their best medical teams, doctors from 5 different species. They were competent, even excellent at their jobs, but they didn't have 30 years of experience working specifically with Thelmari biology the way Patricia Cole had done. By the time they developed a partial cure, 40 million Thelmari had died. It was the worst plague in their recorded history. Ventari stood at Patricia Cole's old desk, which he'd kept exactly as she'd left it, and wondered if she'd heard about the plague. He wondered if she felt guilty for leaving. Then he realized that was unfair. She hadn't left. She'd been told to go. The economic problems started slowly, then accelerated like an avalanche. Greg Palmar had run the largest human manufacturing consortium in council space. His factories had produced advanced computer systems, the kind used in everything from ships to medical equipment to communications networks. The factories were scattered across a dozen worlds, employing hundreds of thousands of workers from multiple species. When the humans left, Palmer had offered to sell the factories to local governments or corporations. The price had been fair, more than fair actually, but there was a catch. The manufacturing processes were complex, built around human engineering principles. Palmer had offered to leave behind training teams for 6 months to ensure smooth transition. Most governments had declined. The factories couldn't be that complicated to run. Besides, accepting help from the humans would look like admitting they needed humanity. Better to figure it out themselves? 3 months after the sale, production had dropped by 60%. The remaining workers were doing their best, but they didn't understand the maintenance protocols, the quality control systems, or the supply chain management that Palmer's teams had developed over decades. The result was predictable. Computer systems became scarce, prices tripled. Industries that relied on those systems found themselves unable to get the components they needed. Ships sat in docks waiting for replacement parts. Hospitals postponed upgrades to medical equipment. Communication networks started showing strain. The Vraxian economy, which had been heavily integrated with human trade, was hit hardest. Unemployment rose. Businesses closed. High Chancellor Zarthik found himself facing something he'd never expected. Riots in the streets of the Vraxian capital. He tried to contact Greg Palmer, hoping to negotiate some kind of arrangement, anything to get production back on track. The communication was received but never answered. Palmer and his entire consortium had moved beyond the galactic rim with the rest of humanity. They were done doing business with the council. Zarthik sat in his office, watching footage of the riots, and tried to remember why expelling the humans had seemed like such a good idea. The worst incident came 8 months after humanity's departure. A Caltharian exploration vessel called the Star Wanderer was charting systems near the former human research station, Outpost Meridian. Captain Telmarik was an experienced explorer, careful and methodical. He checked his charts, confirmed his coordinates, and prepared to jump to the next system. The ship never made the jump. Instead, it became trapped in a spatial anomaly, a twist in space-time that grabbed the vessel and held it like an insect in amber. The engines screamed as they tried to break free, but the anomaly was too strong. Telmarik immediately sent out a distress call. "This is the Star Wanderer. We are trapped in a spatial anomaly at coordinates 7-7-9er-4-Alpha. Requesting immediate assistance." The nearest council vessel was 3 days away, but Outpost Meridian, the human research station, was less than an hour distant. Its equipment was specifically designed to handle spatial anomalies. It could pull the Star Wanderer free in minutes. The problem was simple: the station was locked. Human encryption protocols sealed every system. The Council had tried to break into the station months ago, hoping to claim the valuable research equipment inside. They'd failed completely. Human cybersecurity was apparently several generations ahead of Council technology. Captain Telmarik and his crew of 17 waited while Council ships tried everything they could. They attempted to physically pull the Star Wanderer free with tractor beams. The beams couldn't get a stable lock through the anomaly. They tried to disrupt the anomaly with weapons fire. That only made it worse. All the while, Outpost Meridian sat silent in the darkness, its powerful equipment offline and useless. After 2 weeks, the Star Wanderer's life support failed. All 17 crew members died when Council investigators finally managed to access the station's logs using equipment shipped in from the other side of Council space. They found detailed warnings about that exact anomaly. Dr. Carl Jensen had mapped it 3 years earlier and had submitted a formal report to the Council's navigation authority. The report had been filed and forgotten. It was marked as low priority because Jensen's recommendation to post warning beacons had been considered too expensive. After all, very few ships traveled through that area. The investigators found something else in the logs: complete instructions for safely extracting ships from that type of anomaly. Jensen had even included simulation data showing the exact procedures to follow. The information had been there all along. They just couldn't access it when they needed it. Elder Costin received the full report about the Star Wanderer incident. He read it 3 times, then began compiling his own report. A list of human contributions to Council space. Things they'd built, maintained, researched, or protected. He worked on the list for weeks. It grew to hundreds of pages. Defense networks, medical research, economic partnerships, technological innovations, diplomatic initiatives, humanitarian aid operations. On and on it went, a catalog of 3 decades of human effort on behalf of the Council. How much of it had the Council appreciated? How much had they even noticed? Costum tried to present his findings to the council, but no one wanted to hear it. They were too busy dealing with the current crises, the pirate attacks, the plague, the economic problems, the accidents and incidents that kept piling up. 3 years after humanity's departure, the war with the Draer had finally ground to a halt. Not through victory, but through exhaustion. Both sides had fought themselves to a standstill, and an uneasy ceasefire now held, but the cost was staggering. The Council had lost 40% of its territory. Entire species had been displaced. Economies were shattered. What remained of Council space was fortified but fragile, held together by desperation and the grim determination to survive. Every day was a struggle. Captain Kelthas commanded a Council scout ship called the Swift Survey. His mission was to chart safe routes through the contested border zones, looking for resources and possible colony sites. It was dangerous work, but necessary. The Council needed every advantage it could find. On a routine survey mission, his navigation system malfunctioned. The quantum drive engaged before he could abort, sending the Swift Survey on a random jump into completely uncharted space. When the ship dropped back into normal space, Kelthas found himself somewhere he'd never seen on any star chart. And he wasn't alone. His sensors immediately detected massive energy signatures. Ships, hundreds of them. And then he saw the stations, enormous orbital facilities around multiple planets. And the planets themselves showed clear signs of civilization. Cities, industrial complexes, agricultural zones. This wasn't an exploration outpost. This was an entire civilization. Kelthas checked the ship's signatures against his database, even though he already knew what he would find. The energy patterns, the hull configurations, the communication frequencies. Human, all of it. He stared at his tactical display in absolute shock. In just 3 years, humanity had built this. Dozens of colony worlds, hundreds of orbital stations, thousands of ships. This wasn't survival. This was an empire in the making. Before he could process what he was seeing, his communications system activated. A human patrol ship had detected his vessel and was approaching. Unidentified ship, this is Commander Brandon White of the human patrol vessel Guardian's Watch. You've entered human territory. Please state your identity and intentions. Kelthas activated his own communications, his voice shaking slightly. Commander White, this is Captain Kelthas of the Council scout ship Swift Survey. I apologize for the intrusion. We experienced a navigation malfunction and ended up here by accident. I had no idea this region was inhabited. There was a pause, then White's voice returned, professional but not unkind. Understood, Captain. We've detected the damage to your navigation system. We can provide repairs if needed. That would be appreciated, Commander. I don't mean to intrude on your space. I'll leave as soon as my ship is capable. No hurry, Captain. Follow my ship to Repair Station Gamma. We'll get you fixed up. The human patrol ship led Kelthas to a massive orbital station. As they traveled, Kelthas couldn't stop staring at what surrounded him. This wasn't some desperate refugee settlement. This was sophisticated, advanced, organized. The orbital stations were larger than anything in Council space. The ships were sleek and powerful, clearly built with technology that had advanced beyond what he remembered. At the repair station, human technicians worked on his ship with impressive efficiency. They were polite, professional, and surprisingly friendly. They asked about his mission, about life in Council space, about the war with the Draer. When Kelthas asked them about their own civilization, they spoke with obvious pride. They'd found multiple habitable worlds in this region, along with dozens of species who'd welcomed humanity's arrival. Together they were building something new, a cooperative civilization based on mutual respect and shared goals. We're not trying to recreate the Council, one of the technicians explained. We learned from that experience. This is something different. Better, we hope. Commander White met with Kelthas before his departure. They shared a meal in the station's observation deck, looking out at the busy traffic of human and alien ships. Commander, I have to ask, Kelthas said carefully. The Council is struggling badly. We lost so much when humanity left. Couldn't you help? Even a little? White was quiet for a long moment. Captain, I understand your situation. But helping the Council isn't that simple. First, we have our own people to care for, our own civilization to build. We can't abandon that responsibility. But surely, second and more importantly, the Council needs to learn to stand on their own. We can't be their eternal support system. That's not healthy for anyone. White looked at Kelphas with sympathy. The Council has all the knowledge we left behind. They have capable people. What they lack is the will to do the hard work of building and maintaining systems. Rushing back to help them would just enable the same dependent relationship that caused problems before. So you'll let us fail? We're letting you figure it out. There's a difference. White leaned forward. Tell me honestly, Captain. If humans came back tomorrow and fixed everything, what would the Council learn? What would change? Kelphas had no answer. The Council needs to understand that maintaining a civilization requires constant work. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting. It's maintenance schedules and training programs and safety protocols. It's doing things right even when no one's watching. Humans didn't do all that because we were special. We did it because we understood it was necessary. White stood, signaling the meal was over. Your ship is repaired, Captain. You're free to go. When you return to Council space, tell them what you saw here. Tell them that humanity is thriving, and tell them that whether the Council survives or not, we'll be fine. We always are. Kelphas made the long journey back to Council space, his mind full of what he'd seen. When he filed his report, it spread through the Council like wildfire. The revelations were devastating. Humanity wasn't coming back. They didn't need the Council. They'd found a better future without them. Elder Costum, now the senior member of the Council, called for an emergency session. When the delegates had assembled, he stood before them with a grim expression. We need to face the truth. Humanity is gone. They're building a new civilization, one that doesn't include us. We can spend our energy trying to bring them back, or we can focus on saving ourselves. One proposed we choose the latter. Matriarch Selvara, older and wiser from her failures, stood to support him. Elder Costum is right. We need to stop looking to humanity to save us. They left us all their knowledge, all their systems. We just need to use them. The debate that followed was heated but ultimately productive. For the first time since humanity's departure, the Council began to seriously discuss how to rebuild without them. It was slow, painful work. They had to rely on how to maintain the systems humans had built. They had to train new specialists in fields humans had dominated. They had to rebuild trust with each other and with their own citizens, but gradually things began to stabilize. Not quickly, not easily, but progress was made. The Council sent one final delegation to try to contact humanity. Elder Costum led it himself, along with Matriarch Selvara. They traveled to the coordinates Kelphas had provided and waited at the border of human space. A human representative arrived to meet them. Ambassador Lavron Mitchell greeted them politely but with clear boundaries. The conversation was brief and painful. Costum apologized. Selvara apologized. They explained how the Council had changed, how they were trying to do better. Mitchell listened patiently. When they finished, she spoke gently but firmly. We appreciate your words. Apologies are important, but they don't change our decision. We're not coming back. But we've changed, Selvara insisted. Maybe you have. Maybe you haven't. Time will tell. Mitchell folded her hands. But either way, we're not coming back as your guardians or your servants or your convenient solution to problems. You wanted to stand on your own. We're letting you. That's what respect looks like. We're not asking you to serve us, Costum said quietly. We're asking for a partnership, real partnership between equals. Partnership requires trust, Elder. Trust takes time to build. The Council spent decades taking our contributions for granted, then threw us away when we became inconvenient. You can't rebuild that trust with a few apologetic words. Mitchell stood, signaling the meeting was ending. Maybe someday, years from now, when both our civilizations have grown and changed, we can try again. But not now. The wounds are too fresh. The memories too painful. What should we do? Salvara asked, her voice small. Survive, grow, learn from your mistakes. Build something worth being proud of. Mitchell's expression softened slightly. We don't hate you. We don't wish you harm. We just don't trust you, and we don't need you. That's the reality you have to accept. The delegation returned to council space with the final, definitive answer. Humanity was not coming back, not now. Probably not ever. The news was devastating, but also, in a strange way, liberating. The council could stop hoping for rescue and focus on saving themselves. 10 years after humanity's departure, the council had survived. Barely, but they'd made it. The war with the Draer was officially over, ended through a negotiated settlement. Council space was smaller, poorer, and more fragile than before. But it still existed. On the anniversary of humanity's departure, a ceremony was held at the monument on the old embassy grounds. Thousands attended, including Elder Costum, now ancient and near the end of his life. He stood before the stone pillar. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Draer came. They appeared at the edge of council space like a nightmare made real. Hundreds of bioships, living vessels grown rather than built, emerged from the darkness beyond the neutral zones. The Draer swarm had been a distant threat for decades. Contained and managed through a complex network of early warning systems and defensive satellites, that network was now failing. Admiral Corvus of the Vraxian Defense Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the sensor displays with growing horror. The Draer weren't just probing the borders anymore. They were attacking in force, pushing deep into systems that should have been protected. How did they get past the outer defense grid? He demanded. His tactical officer, a young Vraxian named Pelkoth, pulled up the maintenance logs. Sir, the outer defense grid has been operating at 60% capacity for the past 4 months. Multiple satellite failures across the network. Why wasn't I informed? The maintenance requests were filed with Council Defense Command. They've been marked as pending. Pelkoth's voice was carefully neutral. The satellites were designed and maintained by human engineering teams. Without them, I understand. Corvus cut him off. He understood perfectly. The defense network had been built over 50 years, a joint project between multiple species. But the humans had designed 60% of it, and more importantly, they'd maintained it. Their engineers had understood the complex systems in ways that apparently no one else did. The council had tried to hire contractors to take over the maintenance. Some had tried. Most had failed. The human systems were simply too advanced, too integrated, too dependent on knowledge that had walked away with humanity. Now the Draer were exploiting the gaps. Sound the alert, Corvus ordered. Full military mobilization. And get me a direct line to Council Command. The Battle of Rigel Station would later be studied as a textbook example of how not to fight a defensive war. Rigel Station was a massive trade hub, home to nearly 1 billion beings from across Council space. It sat at the intersection of 6 major trade routes, making it economically vital. It was also heavily fortified, with defense platforms and a permanent fleet presence. Admiral Corvus arrived with his fleet 3 days after the initial Draer incursion. He had ships from 7 different species under his command, nearly 200 vessels total. It should have been more than enough to defend the station. The problem wasn't the ships. It was getting them to work together. Human tactical officers had always served as coordinators for multi-species fleets. They developed the communication protocols, the command systems, the real-time translation software that let different species coordinate in battle. It wasn't because other species couldn't do it. It was because humans had invested decades in making it work smoothly. Now, without those coordinators, communication broke down almost immediately. The Caltharian ships used formation tactics that required tight coordination. The Vraxian vessels preferred independent action with loosely coordinated objectives. The Mindari fought in defensive formations that assumed other species would adapt to their positioning. In simulations, human coordinators had found ways to make all these different approaches work together. In reality, without those coordinators, the fleet was chaos. Commander Jacob Price had run exactly this scenario in war games 5 years ago. He'd submitted a detailed report warning that multi-species fleets needed better integration and cross-training. The report had been dismissed as unrealistic worst case. Thinking Price had been told his simulations were too pessimistic, now his worst case was playing out in real time. The Draer hit Rigel Station with overwhelming force. Their bioships didn't need to coordinate through radio or quantum communications. They were a hive mind acting with perfect unity. Against the fragmented, poorly coordinated Council fleet, they were devastating. The battle lasted 6 hours. Rigel Station fell. Over 800 million beings died in the attack or the chaotic evacuation that followed. Admiral Corvus survived. He would spend the rest of his life knowing that with proper coordination, proper integration, the kind of seamless multi-species cooperation humans had provided, the station could have held for weeks, long enough for reinforcements, long enough to evacuate properly, but that knowledge came too late. The refugee crisis that followed was unprecedented in Council history. Billions fled the Draer advance. They came in massive waves, overwhelming refugee centers across Council space. Food, medicine, shelter all became critically scarce. The logistics of handling that many displaced beings would have challenged any civilization. For the Council, already weakened by economic problems and infrastructure failures, it was nearly impossible. Lieutenant Amy Ross had coordinated the humanitarian response during the Caltharian famine 20 years ago. She'd been just a junior logistics officer then, but she'd shown remarkable talent for managing complex supply chains across multiple systems. Over the next 2 decades, she'd handled disaster relief operations across Council space, training teams and developing systems. When she left with the rest of humanity, those systems left with her, the Council tried to replicate her methods. They had her reports, her organizational charts, her supply chain models. On paper, they knew what to do. But knowing what to do and being able to do it were different things. Administrator Peter Grant had handled the diplomatic side of relief operations, negotiating with governments and corporations to provide aid. He'd had relationships with leaders across 15 species, built over years of patient work. When he left, those relationships disappeared. The Council's relief efforts were slow, disorganized, and inadequate. Refugee camps became overcrowded disaster zones. Disease spread. Food riots broke out. Local governments, overwhelmed by the influx, started turning refugees away at their borders. It was a humanitarian catastrophe that grew worse every day. Matriarch Silvara watched the reports coming in from the refugee camps and felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries. Shame. She'd been one of the strongest voices calling for humanity's expulsion. She'd argued that humans were too controlling, too arrogant, always acting like they knew better than everyone else. Now, looking at the cascading disasters, she wondered if maybe they had known better, not because humans were inherently superior, but because they'd done the work. They'd built the systems, developed the relationships, trained the people. They'd invested decades in making Council space function smoothly. And the Council had taken it all for granted. Silvara made a decision. She would find humanity and bring them back. Pride be damned. The Council needed them. She assembled a small team and began tracing the human exodus. It wasn't easy. Humans had left no clear trail. They'd jumped to faster-than-light travel at the edge of Council space and disappeared into uncharted territory, but Silvara was patient and resourceful. She followed rumors, intercepted communications, traced supply shipments. Slowly, over months, she pieced together a general direction. Humanity had gone beyond the galactic rim, into regions no Council species had explored. Her team finally intercepted a human freighter at the edge of mapped space. The freighter's captain was a woman named Nicole Harper, the same captain who'd commanded the Outer Rim Patrol Fleet. Silvara's ship hailed the freighter. "Captain Harper, this is Matriarch Silvara of the Caltharian Collective. I request a moment of your time." Harper's face appeared on the view screen. She looked older, more tired than Silvara remembered. But there was also something else in her expression. Peace, maybe, or freedom. "Matriarch, I wondered if someone would come looking eventually. Captain, the Council needs humanity's help. We're facing a war with the Draer. Billions are displaced. Systems are failing. Salvara stopped, choosing her words carefully. We made a mistake. We need you to come back. Harper was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. Matriarch, we have no quarrel with you or the Council. But we're done serving those who didn't want us. The Council made their choice. We respected it. But the Draer were always going to be a problem. General Frank Carter warned the Council about them 7 years ago. He proposed defensive upgrades and early response protocols. The Council called him a warmonger and rejected every proposal. This isn't a surprise, Matriarch. It's the inevitable result of ignoring warnings. We were wrong. I was wrong. I'm admitting that. Isn't that enough? Harper's expression softened slightly. It's a start. But apologies don't rebuild what took decades to create. And even if we wanted to help, we can't just snap our fingers and fix everything. Those systems, those relationships, that knowledge, it all took time to develop. You can't shortcut that. So you'll let billions suffer because we hurt your feelings? That's not fair, Matriarch. Harper's voice sharpened. We offered to help before this happened. We warned you. We trained people, shared knowledge, built systems. You rejected all of it. Now you want us to come running back because ignoring us had consequences? That's not how this works. What about the refugees? The children dying in camps? I think about them every day, Harper said quietly. But we're not coming back. We can't save people who won't save themselves. That's not cruelty. That's reality. The Council needs to figure this out. You have the 18 months after humanity's departure, Council space had lost 32 systems to the Draer advance. The war had settled into a grinding stalemate, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. But the cost was staggering. Trillions of beings were displaced, entire civilizations had been disrupted, and the Council's economy was in free fall, in a small research facility on the Caltharian homeworld. A young archivist named Vitari made a discovery that would change everything. She'd been assigned to catalog old Council records. A boring job that usually involved filing digital documents into proper databases. But Vitari was thorough. And when she found a sealed archive labeled Human Council Contributions, she was curious enough to open it. What she found inside took her breath away. There were thousands of documents. Proposals, warnings, offers of assistance, research papers, diplomatic initiatives. Decades of human work on behalf of the Council, all carefully documented and filed. And beside almost every entry was a notation: rejected, dismissed, denied, ignored. Ves single quotes tar. I started reading. She couldn't stop. She found warnings about the Draer threat from General Frank Carter, filed 8 years ago. He'd predicted almost exactly what was happening now and had proposed defensive measures that would have stopped it. The Council had called his proposals unnecessarily aggressive and warmongering. She found pandemic response protocols from Dr. Susan Mitchell, comprehensive plans for handling exactly the kind of plague that had killed 40 million Thelmari. The Council had rejected them as excessive and too expensive. She found economic stabilization plans from analyst Richard Stone, proposals that would have prevented the current economic collapse. They'd been ignored as too complex and unrealistic. She found infrastructure upgrade plans from engineer Helen Price, detailed specifications for maintaining the defensive satellite network. The Council had defunded the upgrades as unnecessary expenses. Every disaster the Council now faced had been predicted. Every crisis had been preventable. The evidence was right there, in thousands of carefully written documents that no one had bothered to read. Vitari sat in the empty archive room, surrounded by the ghosts of warnings ignored, and felt sick. She made a decision that would probably end her career. She copied the entire archive and published it on the Public Information Network. All of it. Every warning, every proposal, every offer of help that had been rejected. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Within hours, billions of beings across council space were reading the archives. They saw the warnings about the Draer that their leaders had ignored. They saw the medical research that could have saved millions. They saw the economic plans that would have prevented poverty and starvation. Most devastating of all, they saw dates. They could trace exactly when humans had warned about problems, when those warnings had been rejected. And when those problems had come to pass, riots broke out on dozens of worlds. Not against humans, but against their own governments. How could their leaders have been so arrogant? How could they have rejected help that would have saved so many lives? The council convened an emergency session. High Chancellor Zarthik, now politically weak and facing calls for his resignation, tried to defend his decisions. The humans were arrogant, he argued. They acted superior. They made us feel like children who needed their guidance. Elder Costume stood to respond. His voice was cold and controlled. They were competent. We mistook their excellence for arrogance because it made us feel inadequate. And rather than learn from them, rather than work with them, we expelled them. We have no one to blame but ourselves. The chamber erupted in shouting. Some agreed with Costume. Others tried to defend the decision to expel humanity. But the argument was meaningless now. The damage was done. Zarthik was removed from power within a week. His replacement, Councillor Marvin, immediately sent a formal request for human aid. It was carefully worded, humble, acknowledging the council's mistakes. The message was received. But there was no response. Marvin tried again. And again. Each message went unanswered. It was as if humanity had simply erased the council from their concern. The council began to fracture. 3 species, desperate for stability, withdrew from the council entirely. They hoped that by separating themselves from the council's decisions, they might negotiate separately with humanity. They sent their own diplomatic missions into the darkness beyond the galactic rim. None of them ever received a response. Their messages went into the void and stayed there. Humanity wasn't interested in piecemeal relationships with species that had been part of the decision to expel them. The Vraxian government, already weakened by economic collapse, fell completely. Civil war broke out as different factions fought for control. The once proud empire descended into chaos. Ziafek, disgraced and exiled, spent his final years in a small dwelling on a remote colony world. He would sometimes access the public networks and read about the continuing disasters in council space. Each new crisis felt like a personal accusation. He thought he was protecting his people's independence. Instead, he'd condemned them to suffering. Someone erected an unauthorized monument on the old human embassy grounds. It was simple, just a stone pillar with words carved into it. Here stood those who served without asking for glory, who protected without demanding gratitude, who gave without requiring recognition. We told them to leave. They did. We have no one to blame but ourselves. The council voted to remove the monument. It was an embarrassment, a reminder of their failure. But the vote failed. Too many council members, too many ordinary citizens, felt the monument should stay. It became a pilgrimage site. Thousands visited every year, leaving flowers and notes of apology that would never be read by human eyes. Some left children's drawings. Others left poems. Many simply stood in silence, mourning what had been lost. 1 year after the monument's construction, a council patrol ship encountered a human vessel at the very edge of known space. Captain Veralith commanded the patrol ship. When his sensors detected the human exploration vessel, his first reaction was joy. Finally, contact with humanity. Maybe this could be the beginning of reconciliation. He sent a greeting message immediately. Human vessel, this is Captain Veralith of the Council patrol ship Vigilant Dawn. It's good to see you out here. May we speak? There was a long pause before the response came. When it did, the human captain's voice was professional but distant. This is Captain Raymond Clark of the exploration vessel Far Horizon. We can speak briefly, Captain. What do you need? Nothing, Veralith struggled to find words. I wanted to talk. To ask about humanity. To maybe discuss the possibility of renewed relations. There's nothing to discuss, Captain. We're no longer part of your civilization. We have our own path now. But the council has changed. We've acknowledged our mistakes. We want... What you want doesn't matter. Clark's voice wasn't angry, just matter of fact. You made a decision. We respected it. Now we're living our lives. We wish you well, but we cannot help you. Voralith felt desperation rising. People are dying. Billions are suffering. You have the knowledge, the resources. We also have our own people to care for. Our own future to build. Clark paused. Captain, I understand you're in a difficult situation. But the Council created that situation. We warned you. We offered help. You rejected it. We're not going to abandon our own future to fix problems you created for yourselves. Where are you building this future? Where is humanity now? For the first time, Voralith heard something like emotion in Clark's voice. Sadness, perhaps. Somewhere you'll never find us. Somewhere we can build without being told we're doing it wrong. Somewhere people appreciate what we contribute instead of resenting us for it. And you'll just let us suffer? We're not letting anything happen. We're simply not involved anymore. You wanted independence from us? You have it. What you do with that independence is your choice. The human ship's engines began powering up for a jump to faster-than-light travel. Captain Clark, please. Goodbye, Captain Voralith. I hope your council finds its way. I really do. But whether you succeed or fail, we'll be fine. We always are. The human ship jumped, vanishing into the darkness. Voralith sat in his command chair, staring at the empty space where it had been, feeling the weight of everything humanity's absence represented. He returned to council space and filed his report. It spread quickly through official channels and then leaked to the public. The revelation that humanity was not just surviving, but thriving, building their own civilization somewhere beyond reach, hit the council like a physical blow. They weren't coming back. Not now, not ever, Elder Costum read Voralith's report in his private chambers. He was old now, tired. He'd spent the past 2 years trying to hold the council together, trying to guide them through the disasters that kept mounting. He thought about Ambassador Daniel Hayes, Commander Lisa Bennett, Dr. Kevin Morris, and all the other humans he'd worked with over the decades. Good people. Competent people. People who genuinely wanted to help, and the council had thrown them away. Costum opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small data chip. On it was the last personal message he'd received from Hayes, sent just before humanity's final departure. He'd never opened it. He'd been too ashamed.